I grew up in a crumbling apartment block tucked inside a small, sleepy village. One of those places where every creak of a floorboard carried stories and everyone knew whose child you were. After my parents died in a car accident, I was sent to live with my mother's sister, my aunt. To outsiders, she was a kind, charitable woman who had taken in her orphan niece out of pure love and duty. Neighbors often praised her, saying I was lucky to have someone like her. But luck, I soon learned, could be cruelly deceptive. I was 17 when I moved in, still in school with no money, no voice, and nowhere else to go. My aunt wore a gentle smile in public, but behind closed doors, it disappeared like mist in the morning. She controlled everything, from what I ate to when I slept. Her words, sharp and cold, were always wrapped in expectations I could never seem to meet. I became a shadow in her house, quiet, obedient, invisible. I didn't fight back. I didn't cry. I just endured. Because that's what powerless people do. They survive in silence, at least until they learn how not to. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had just come home from school, my uniform damp at the edges, my shoes muddy from the walk back. Clutched tightly in my hands was an envelope, a letter that could change my life, a full scholarship. I had been accepted into an international program in another country. My grades, my essays, my late-night study sessions had finally paid off. I held that envelope like a fragile piece of hope, too scared to even open it completely until I was safely in the small corner of the house that I called mine. But before I could even celebrate, she saw it. My aunt's eyes landed on the letter as I was about to slip it into my school bag. "What's that?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. I hesitated. That was my first mistake. She snatched it from my hands. Her eyes skimmed the lines and her lips curled into something twisted, something cold and furious. "So you were planning to run away from here, huh?" she hissed. "You think you're better than me?" "Than this house?" I didn't even have time to explain. Her voice rose, shrill and venomous, echoing through the walls. She screamed that I was an ungrateful little thief, accused me of stealing the letter, of faking the scholarship to gain attention. Then she dragged me by the arm into the living room, threw the letter on the ground, and in front of 3 neighbors who had come over for tea, she spat the words that broke me. She stole money from my drawer, and now she's lying about going abroad. I caught her sneaking around with this fake letter. I stood there frozen. The letter still lay on the floor, the edges beginning to curl from her grip. One of the neighbors stared at me in disgust. Another mumbled, "How disappointing. I thought she was different." My mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. My throat closed up. My chest was tight. I had never felt so completely erased. Then came the worst part. Without warning, she ripped the letter in half, then in quarters, and threw the pieces into the trash like they were scraps of trash themselves. "You'll go nowhere," she whispered coldly. "Not as long as you live under this roof." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, my legs numb, my heart hollowed out. That night, I lay on my mattress staring at the ceiling, hearing their voices in my head again and again. Liar. Thief. Ungrateful. My reputation, my dream, my dignity, shattered in a matter of minutes. After that day, everything changed. Or perhaps everything simply revealed its true nature. The house no longer felt like a shelter. It became a prison. I stopped going out unless it was to school. The neighbors stopped looking at me with kindness. Some ignored me. Others muttered behind my back. One even called me the girl who bit the hand that fed her. My aunt, meanwhile, flourished in her role as the martyr. She'd sigh heavily when people asked about me, as if burdened beyond endurance. She told them I was troubled, that I didn't appreciate what I had. And they believed her. Inside those walls, I became something less than human. I wasn't spoken to, I was barked at. She gave me chores from morning to night, used every opportunity to humiliate me. "May marangwai người ta cười thui mạch," she'd sneer. "Không có tao mày chỉ là con rác rưởi." She stopped cooking for me. I ate leftovers, if there were any. She once poured a whole bowl of soup into the sink right in front of me, just because I answered too slowly. "May không dangan," she said. I remember the light, the way the sunlight used to warm the wooden floor near the window. I'd sit there sometimes, staring at the dust particles floating in the air. That was the only place I felt anything close to peace. I started counting things. How many steps from my room to the kitchen? How many tiles cracked in the bathroom? It gave me a sense of control, however small. Then came the silence, the real silence. Not from outside, but from inside me. My voice stopped working. Even in school, I barely spoke. The teachers noticed, but no one asked. I was just the quiet girl with tired eyes and bruised arms I always said were from falling. But silence is a strange thing. It doesn't mean nothing is happening. Sometimes it means something is growing. Inside that silence, something stirred. Faint at first, then stronger. Rage? Maybe. But it was quieter than rage. More patient. I began watching her. Not with fear, but with focus. I listened when she thought I wasn't. I paid attention to what she said, how she lied, how easily she twisted things to fit her version of the truth. I started remembering everything, every word, every time she claimed to spend her money on my school fees, while I knew she used my parents' death benefit to buy gold jewelry. Every time she showed people photos of me smiling in primary school and said, "She used to be such a good girl, I don't know what went wrong." I stopped being sad. I stopped hoping she would love me. That version of me died the day she tore that letter. What remained was something colder, sharper. I didn't want pity. I didn't even want revenge. At least not the kind you see in movies. I just wanted the truth to have a voice. My voice. And so the silence became a strategy. I made myself invisible to her, just as she had tried to make me invisible to the world. But inside, I was documenting everything, like a journalist of my own pain. Every insult, every manipulation, every lie. She didn't know it, but she was building my case for me, one cruel word at a time. Because one day, I promised myself, she would hear the truth. Not in whispers, but in front of every face she had fooled. And on that day, I wouldn't be the girl in the shadow anymore. It started with a voice. Not mine, but hers. Late one night, I was returning from the market, having run an errand she'd barked at me to do. As I walked quietly down the hallway, I heard her speaking on the phone. The door to her room was ajar. Her voice was sharp, impatient, but relaxed in a way I had never heard when she spoke to me. I stopped, hidden by the shadows, and listened. "I told them she's a troublemaker," she said, followed by a short laugh. "Of course I didn't use the support money for her. Why should I? That girl owes me for everything. I'm the one who feeds her, not her dead parents." There was a pause, then I had to fake some documents for the scholarship nonsense. They would have taken her away if they knew. "She's nothing without me." The words dropped like stones into the stillness of the hallway. My breath caught. For a long moment I stood there, frozen, not in fear this time, but in revelation. Every suspicion I'd buried, every half-thought I'd dismissed to protect my fragile heart, now burned into certainty. She had stolen everything, from my parents, from me, from the future I almost touched. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat quietly on my mattress, eyes open in the dark, as if my soul had finally cracked open to let something else crawl out. I didn't know what to call it yet, but I knew it was awake now, and it wasn't going to sleep again. The next morning, I borrowed an old phone from a classmate who didn't ask too many questions. I told her I needed it to record lectures. She shrugged and handed it over. From then on, I kept it tucked inside my pocket or hidden under my pillow, always ready. The recordings began. They weren't hard to get. My aunt's venom poured out daily. Every insult, every slap of a wooden spoon on the table, every threat, captured. I learned her rhythms when she was at her most careless, when she thought I was too scared to remember. While she napped in the afternoon, I searched drawers, lifted mattress corners, crept into the locked cabinet when she forgot the key. I found old letters addressed to my name, never opened, bank statements, a copy of my father's death certificate with notations in her handwriting, a forged signature, mine, on a letter requesting scholarship cancellation. I took pictures, scanned pages at the school's dusty library printer. Step by step, I collected fragments of truth. Still, I knew I couldn't fight her alone. I thought of Mr. Din. My literature teacher from middle school. He once told me I wrote like someone twice my age. He had a softness that didn't pity, but encouraged. After school one afternoon, I found him still grading papers. I stood at the door until he looked up. At first, he didn't recognize me. Then his eyes widened. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. I told him everything. Well, most of it. Enough. He listened in silence, then asked to see the papers, the recordings. His hands trembled as he flipped through the evidence. When he finished, he looked up at me, not with shock, but with a kind of sorrowful anger. "I'll help you," he said, "but we must be careful." Over the next 6 months, he became my secret ally. He guided me in assembling a clean, chronological file, helped me understand legal terms, how to write clearly, precisely. He even introduced me to a social worker, unofficially, who reviewed the case under the table and confirmed it. There were grounds for exposure, but timing was everything. I waited, endured, played my role to perfection, silent, obedient, invisible, until the day arrived. It was a Sunday, the annual community event hosted at the village school. There was a ceremony for honoring exemplary guardians, and my aunt, with her carefully curated mask of benevolence, was to receive a plaque for her selfless care of her orphaned niece. The courtyard buzzed with noise. Children ran past, neighbors chatted over paper cups of tea. My aunt wore her finest ow dye, her hair sprayed stiff, her lips red. She gripped the microphone like a queen. "I didn't raise her because I had to," she declared. "I raised her because I love her. And I believe every child deserves a second chance, a second chance." I stepped forward. People noticed me standing at the edge of the stage, in plain clothes, holding a folder and a USB drive. I walked slowly, calmly. Her smile faltered as I climbed the steps. "What are you doing?" she whispered. I turned to the crowd. My voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried. "I have something to say." They quieted. I plugged the USB into the projector. Images appeared. Scans of letters, statements, forged documents. "This," I said, pointing, "is my father's death benefit, used without my knowledge. This," I continued, clicking forward, "is a letter I never wrote, canceling my scholarship." Gasps. "And this," I said finally, "is her voice." I played the audio. Her words, so familiar to me, now echoed across the courtyard. Laughter about stolen money, mocking my parents, bragging about control. When it ended, I looked at her. Her face was pale, lips parted, hands shaking. "If you are a good person," I asked, "why did you steal my future?" Silence, then murmurs, then outrage. Someone shouted, "Shame on you!" Another threw her plaque to the ground. The social worker, who had attended quietly at Mr. Din's request, stepped forward and asked my aunt to come with her for questioning. She didn't protest. She didn't scream. She just lowered her head and walked off the stage. The crowd didn't cheer. This wasn't a victory anyone clapped for. It was heavier than that. But I stood there, not trembling, not crying, just breathing. For the first time in years, I felt my own weight, my own voice. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was the truth she couldn't silence. In the days that followed, my aunt's name vanished from the village's praises. The neighbors who once admired her crossed the street to avoid her. The community leader removed her from the local women's association. Even the people who had once whispered behind my back now looked at me with a strange mix of guilt and quiet respect. The social welfare office contacted her for an official review. There were questions she couldn't answer, papers she couldn't explain. Her carefully built image crumbled piece by piece. As for me, a small private foundation, moved by my story, shared discreetly through my teacher, offered to sponsor my studies. It wasn't abroad, but it was enough. I moved out into a small rented room near the city. The mattress was thin, the nights were long, but they were mine. Each morning I woke up knowing no one would scream my name. No one would tear my dreams apart. People asked me if I felt proud, if I felt like I had won, but I didn't feel triumphant, just free. Forgiveness came quietly, not as a gift to her, but as a release for me, because forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who no longer holds power over your peace.